The Cardinal Inn served generationally within the city of Portland, Oregon, as one of the more banal sightseeing spaces in its 112-year lifetime. Seemingly one of the last theaters you would go to for casual view time with the friends or family, albeit the space itself was a local anomaly. It had often been described as a place where everything seems wrong. I mean, even the name, Cardinal Inn, is not indicative of a theater. It feels inclined to a type of a person. In the 70s, it was a smut theater. In the 80s, it became student-ran and mostly played your typical art house Tarkovsky-adjacent flicks, which was pretty common within inner-city Portland, similar to the Fifth Avenue today. But by 2020, the pandemic had done its course on the place. It had already been mostly derelict for the last 10 years, and only hosted the occasional film about once a month for a small-scale screening that likely nobody would come to. So naturally, this led to some intrigue on my part when the Cardinal Inn announced it would feature one final screening before its closure in December of 2024. Unfortunately, the Cardinal Inn was a theater that was fraught with years of terrible maintenance. It is truly amazing that it stayed open for so long. The original steeple went down in the 1930s in a massive windstorm, making the building have a strange and abrupt flat roof. The bottom of it had the displays for film posters from days of yore, through my time. They had been long left to vandalism. This poor building did deserve better. The architecture inside had mostly held up, 2 floors and a French door opening. The show they were playing for their final feature was an interesting choice, likely the pick of a curator that is involved with the theater. It was called Dancer in the Dark, directed by Lars von Trier, a story about a blinded mother who turns to her love of musicals to get through her struggles as she tries to save up money for her son to have an operation to save him from her fate, but ultimately turns into her being framed and sentenced to death for murdering an officer. It's an oddly specific choice for a last screening, though it is a good film, and so with the 2 factors of this event at hand, I decided I would pay a visit for the last time to the Cardinal Inn. Now, I will preface this. I'm not originally from Portland, so I do not have the greatest circle of people here, so I went solo on this one. There was a decent fog in the night air that was pretty typical in December, especially this close to the Willamette River, so there was a naturally mystical feeling when the theater was immediately before me. I walked to the entrance, old wooden French doors with a small fluorescent white light above it that gave it this hospital, church type of energy. I understand that the reason this theater is likely this way because of years of abandon, making it mostly the kind of a spot that can give you odd feelings. Nothing too insane though. I can understand that a 112-year-old building is going to be a little eerie. I was met by the ticket holder. He was immediately put on edge, as if I was there to investigate the place, or even himself. He introduced himself as though he was not working here at all, and there was no greater goal to this interaction than for me to become trusting in him. In a thick Eastern European / Texas accent attempted drawl. "Hello, my name is Christoph. I'm a real American. I come from Pertino, California." "Okay. Where are you from?" Up north in Washington by the Canadian border. Why do you ask?" "I'd just like to know a bit about you. Do you know anything about this place?" "Well, I know it's your last screening tonight." "This place is being condemned. We're having issues. Pipe leaks. If you need water, look elsewhere or get a bottle somewhere." "Okay. I'm just here alone, so just one ticket, please." "Oh yes, sometimes I forget I'm doing a job here." He hands me a ticket at the cost of $12. I don't think that the gentleman is from Cupertino, nor could he even find it on a map. I wandered into the screening hall. The room was quite large and was once likely to hold over 100 people in its heyday, but now there were only 4 people in there. 2 suited gentlemen toward the front corner, and in the far back was a beautiful woman in a kimono, an odd choice in Portland during the winter, but also the people of Portland are known for their odd dress. What felt most odd was the last person in here. I tried to avoid looking at him. He stood in the very back corner in his quasi-mannequin pose, arms out in robotic fashion, sunglasses on, very obviously adorning a wig and never moving at all. It was not even the beginning of the film, and we were in a silent room with no music or advertisements to preface. Just our palpable atmosphere of the 5 people in this room with nothing to say or do. I looked to my phone. No service. The film started, fortunately, within moments. I had chosen my spot about 20 feet from the woman in the kimono. She was behind me about 5 rows and to the left by about 7 seats, so I could quite easily see her from my vantage point. I bring this up as I begin to feel the need to look over at her when I hear the sound of crackles very lightly. Popcorn? No. Peanuts? Nope. Pistachios. She's snacking on pistachios. I don't know why the sound is so distracting. It is with this thought as she slowly begins to crawl over the seat in front of her, barefoot, then once again over the next one, and then another seat and another one. Then on hands and knees she crawls under the chairs behind me, almost seductively slow. Losing sight of her, I'm startled by her almost lizard-like motion until I lose sight of her behind me in the dark abyss of the seats. I instinctually get out of my seat and hear crackles immediately with my movements. I'm suddenly seeing the shells of pistachios drowning the floors where they had not been before. Confused and disturbed, nearly laughing at how deliriously comical yet horrifying this moment was, I needed to gather my senses. I crackled my way to the hallway once more, constantly worried that I'm disrupting the movie for the others that are in here. Despite how aware of the volume of the steps I was taking, one by one, inching so slowly through this big silent room while the movie played, I became aware that the gentlemen were only watching me step through the room, and not the film. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but there was no response. I went through the hallway across the theater from the entrance I came into. It was the restroom hallway, which, as Christoph had noted, obviously had water issues. Almost like a hydrant from the ceiling was absolutely dumping onto the concrete floor. I wandered around it, shocked the way they'd be able to operate in this state. The restroom was up concrete stairs. Around the corner, you could see into the curtains of the room where the film reel projector was hosting the visual of the film. Now, I know you're reading this and thinking, you witnessed a woman crawling over seats and on the floor and then disappeared, and you didn't run for it. Well, yeah, I assumed in a state of shock and confusion that maybe this could be explained in my head, or maybe she was on drugs, or maybe she is actually just screwing with me because I started looking at her and it bothered her. But at this point of entering the restroom, I saw another person in there. They must have been urinating at the urinals for some 45 minutes, or maybe I'd missed him in the seats. Either way, I already felt weird, and I went to wash my face, looking down at the sink to dunk my head into some water. The sink was bone dry, so no success. When I looked up into the mirror, the gentleman walked by, stopped, and waved at me. For almost an hour in my mind, he was there behind me waving from my view of the mirror. "Is there something you want?" I turned, and he was not there. And now I'm getting that something is messing with my head, and I begin to feel a panic when I piece together the last 2 interactions I have had. Trying to hold it together to not draw attention, I walk to the stairwell where I see the waving gentleman in the projector seat. "You really scared me back there in the restroom," I said to him. Only then did I begin to feel like I must be going mad when I saw on the seat was painted a wooden mannequin in the clothes of a man, holding a bucket in his lap. Horrified, I did not want to see what was in his bucket. I knew based on these previous encounters that whatever was in the bucket obviously was bad. But I looked into it anyway. Inside the bucket was a picture in a frame of the man I had seen waving at me in the mirror. Now, I'm not a ghostly believer. I entertain the paranormal for fun and whatnot, but never have I been convinced of ghosts. But this was different, and I needed to leave. Then immediately, in the quietest fashion, I began lightly jogging back to the screening room. The minutes was only about 5 minutes further in, but it felt like I'd been gone for an hour. The room now featured different people amongst the gentleman and standing man in the corner. A couple had entered, and a grandfather and a grandson, who was probably about 4 years old. The room was very clean now. I knew something paranormal was happening. I quietly but swiftly walked back to the entryway. Christoph was still there. Didn't like it? No, I just have to go. This place really gets some people. I hear ghosts like new people here. I had an experience. I was freaking out. I was so glad he was vocalizing my concerns. I felt like Christoph may not be from Cupertino, California, but he just might be trustworthy for confiding in. I have to be honest, Christoph, I never believed in ghosts, but this place swayed me. They mean no harm. They're just good at freaking people out they want to meet. We like ghosts here, Christoph reassured me. They might be creepy, but so far they have always only seemed to want to meet me. Like he said, so maybe I can experience this once-in-a-lifetime scenario and stick it out for another 80 minutes. After all, I'm about halfway there already. I go back in, deciding that, yeah, it was freaky as hell, but there is a very unique scenario here that I want to see out to the end of the film. I go back to my seat where a barefoot man has made himself comfortable behind me. I pay him no mind, really. 20 minutes go by, and I realize that he's smoking. I honestly wouldn't care much if it weren't for us being inside, and it clouding up around my face, making me all teary-eyed. I turned around to say something, to see this man is watching the film, and smoking with tears in his eyes. His bare feet are lounged at the head of the seat immediately behind my head. I'm so confused by this guy that I just let it go and I get up and move. I sit down near the grandfather and grandson. The child was probably too young for this movie, given to where it leads, but I was near convinced I was the only person in here that was not an apparition. More shocking was the moment when the film's murder happened. The grandson began to cry, and they got up and left. There were real people also in this room with me. Were they having weird interactions with ghosts? But there was something that ate at me. The man in the corner standing frozen was still there. Sunglasses still on, wig still on, not a single movement whatsoever. I almost want to interrogate him, but cannot bring myself to do it. I feel something more chaotic about this one than the woman or the projector man. Hell, I started thinking, is Christoph real? I just don't get this place. I'm now intrigued in the atmosphere of the building more than anything. I go to the restroom and go to the urinal. There are 2 men that show up on both sides of me. There are like 7 urinals in here, and they chose to be shoulder to shoulder with me. I have a hard time dealing with people up close, but having both of them on each side of me like this makes me freeze up. I realize all 3 of us are simply standing at the urinals, not doing anything. And I start thinking that they're only here because I am. I decide to step away, and they do exactly the same side by side with me. I'm not sure what this whole deal is, but I just walk to the sink and wash my hands. They just stare at the mirrors on each side of me without movement. When I stop and walk away, we're shoulders together, walking down the stairwell. Then we're met by the standing man in the hallway facing the water pouring from the ceiling. I'm absolutely freaked out, as he's in the same position he has always been in, but no longer facing me, and in a completely different place. I stop. The 2 gentlemen stop on a dime with me, and the standing man is our focal point. He owns the room. Time stops, and I feel genuine regret. I chose to see what would happen in here. I'm the Cardinal. At this point in time, I find it impossible to speak. I observe everything here. It is the only view I get. You are our friend here. You either find us repulsive, or you feel our loving embrace. You're welcome to dance with us if that's what you like to do. Would you like me to sing to you softly, so that we can dance? Perhaps you want to sing. I cannot sing if you're looking at me. I turned away. Time freezes, and against all my will I turned away from him. Suddenly the song, I've seen it all, from the film is playing loudly in the screening room. Tears are rolling down my eyes, and when the song ends, I turn around and he's gone. The song is about both seeing all these sights while also coming to terms with going blind. I'm not even sure when the 2 gentlemen disappeared, but I returned to the screening room. It's completely empty. I sit back down, still reeling from the moment prior. All of my thoughts have turned into mud, and I'm just going to stay right in this seat to the very bitter end of the film. There was still an hour left. From my viewpoint in the corner of my eye, I see someone wander out from the bathroom hallway, and I nearly panic. The kimono woman is standing in the doorway, barely visible, just looking at me. There's blood running down from her leg, from up into her kimono, but it appears that she's unfazed. She stares at me for a very long time, so long that I stop observing her. I was beginning to feel the sense of playing chicken with her eye contact, but I did not want to play. After nearly 10 minutes of staring, she then begins walking towards me very, very slowly. When she's about to pass through the light of the projector, she very unnaturally ducks underneath the light, like a ballerina in the slowest motion, and dodges the light projection and returns to a very slow walk. I'm doing everything in my power to evade giving her any of my attention at all. She walks all the way up to me, looks directly at me, then sits down right next to me. I cannot help but to feel the sheer intensity of what is happening. This is an eternity, and me and her are the only ones in here. She turns over to look at me while she's still seated. She leans towards me as if to kiss me, and I just stare blankly, completely frozen. She stops right at my face and is now breathing at me like she's a bear. Thick, heavy breaths. The film jolts me with a scream, and then it's over. The light comes on immediately without a thought, and the kimono woman is gone. The entrance was dark, but Christoph was out there and he said goodbye to me. I was unable to speak at the end, so I just waved and went home in the fog of the December night. The Cardinal Inn was bulldozed a few weeks later at the beginning of 2025, and when I tell people about the Cardinal Inn being haunted, I'm usually met with some level of suspicion, which is completely reasonable. I would also be suspect. The problem is that within the rubble of the Cardinal Inn, where it once stood, now stands the wooden mannequin of the projector man. And he always seems to be waving.